What? Hold on. What does it say?
It said click to record full screen or drag to record part of the screen.
Oh, click to record full screen. It'll just record everything.
Okay. So it's recording. You're on
Cool.
camera.
There you go.
Wow. How do we get? Well, we can talk about that after.
Okay.
It'll ask you where you want to save it when you're done.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
You are amazing, Nick.
I worked for Apple for 4 years.
Woohoo.
I should get some experience.
Okay, so let's just get this started, I guess.
Yeah.
So you were homeless where?
So I was homeless in a suburb of Orlando, Florida, called Winter Park. Orlando's a weird town. Winter Park is like this triangle between like a old dying residential community and 2 colleges.
Okay, and why? How did you end up there?
I went out there. I was 17 years old. I took a job out there. I went out there to go to school, even though that didn't ultimately happen. And realized after I got there that as a 17-year-old, I couldn't sign a lease and I didn't know anybody. So had a job, was doing okay, but just didn't have anywhere to live. And being the intelligent and independent 17-year-old that I am, decided not to tell anyone because that was embarrassing. And so it was a summer. It was a summer of me like living homeless on a park bench in Winter Park and making friends. And then eventually someone took pity on me, and I slept on a couch for a little while, and then they just gave me the apartment when they moved out.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell us?
That's like the super short version of like how that happened.
Can you tell us some of your experiences of like what day-to-day life was?
Yeah. So, man, I guess it depends on how detailed you want to get. So, Florida rains a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one of the first things I did. I went and bought a tarp from Home Depot, and I had like a duffel bag, and that had like everything that I owned in it, and then a backpack that I would carry with me. I bought a couple of bike locks and a tarp, and what I would do is I would sleep on the park bench in a park that I felt like somewhat safe in, and then I would wake up and I would go take my bag to a dumpster behind a Walgreens, and I would bike lock it to the dumpster. And then, because I knew which day's trash day was, so like a truck wasn't going to come and like take all my stuff and then drive away. And then, generally speaking, that was at like 6 a.m. and I had to be at work at like 8. So that would be at like 6. I'd drop that off. I'd run by a YMCA on my bike, which was on the way. And then I would take a shower at the YMCA.
Did you have a membership there?
Yeah, I got it. Like I said, I had a job, so like I had some resources. I didn't the first week, and that is a completely different story than what I'm telling you right now. But, anyways, so I had some resources, right? So like I figured it out. I got a Y membership, and I like could take showers and do all that fun stuff. And then I would go to work from like 8 to 5, and then I would leave work and I would go check on my stuff, and I would plug my phone in. If it wasn't charged at work, I would plug my phone in on the outlet on the outside of the Walgreens that was across from the park. And then usually, if everything looked good and it wasn't raining, I would just tarp my stuff, retie it up, and like go hang out with friends for a while. Or like maybe there was a church thing going on, or tried it. Like I felt bad. I felt bad trying to find like a shelter because I wasn't. At least I didn't view myself in need in the same way that I saw other people being in need. I just saw myself as like an arrogant kid who had made mistakes and was like now living with the consequences of those actions. And
so, like,
I was like,
deserve the same assistance, basically.
yeah, right. Like I didn't feel like I needed like state help, or like I ultimately I felt like if I were to get into the system in that way, it would be taking it from someone who actually deserved it. And so I was like, yeah, I'm young, I'm 17, like I can figure this out and just be a hippie for a while, and that's fine. And so yeah, like that was the day-to-day like experience. There were exceptional kind of like instances where things would go bad, like it rained really hard one day. I got hit by a forklift at work one day, and I had to like get medication, and I was like, I ended up wandering around Orlando on Vicodin, which was weird. And I mean, like it was terrible. Like I called a friend of mine named Justin, who I had met at work, like because I didn't know where I was, and I was standing in the back of a 7-Eleven, and I was like, I don't know where I am, and I don't entirely feel safe. And I gave him my like street address, and he's like, you need to wait there, and I'll come get you.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyways, yeah. So like the day-to-day lived experience was okay. Food was interesting. Cooking food was interesting. Not like finding places to store food, not eating out all the time. Like I had some resources, but I was still functionally working like a minimum wage job, and just over part-time, like 30-ish hours a week. So it was, I didn't have a ton of money to like throw around and like get a camp stove or whatever. Anyways, I'm rambling. That's kind of the general idea.
How do you feel like you being homeless in the past has affected your life now? Does it have any effect on your life now?
Yeah, actually. I'm way, well, it goes in kind of two different directions. I have this conversation with Michelle all the time, where basically like, because of that experience, coupled with the fact that I was like, my parents always said like, we weren't poor, we're broke, when I was growing up. Like because of those things, like regardless of how much money I make, I just always feel like I don't have anything. Okay. And like it works in weird ways where like if something costs $500, even if I could like remotely afford it, I'm pretty much not going to spend money. Like I'm just gonna be like, no, that's not a thing. I'm not gonna do that. It's not worth spending money on whatever. I think the other thing is, I still have a lot of friends who are homeless.
Okay.
And like I'll talk to people all the time. I tend to like find communities and shelters in like cities that I live in. And a lot of that is just because I think they get a bad rap. Like there was a guy, his name is, we called him Charlie. His name is Charles, if you asked him, in Chicago. I wasn't there for this exchange, but my friend Jesse worked with homeless people in Chicago, and like Charlie had spent a long time like panhandling and like asking for help, and no one would listen to him like you do. Like people just kind of walk by you, and like they feel like they just, if they ignore you, then they don't have to say I don't have money, or I think you're going to spend it on drugs or whatever. And it got to the point that Charlie actually didn't think he had a voice anymore. And so like Jesse essentially talked to him, and Charlie was just like, you can see me. Oh, like I'm not invisible, and like I can talk. And so I tend to like to befriend them. I like to give help. I like to like the most uncommon thing a homeless person will hear at any given day if they're asking for money or help in any way is I believe you. Even more so than I'll help you, right? Like even people who give money will still kind of be cynical about it a lot of times. But even just being willing to be like, yeah, like that sounds awful. I believe that that's the story you have. Like I believe that that's you're not going to spend this money on drugs, and you actually need help, and you're trying to make your life better. And so I think the thing that like that's affected me most is I just try to look at people when I encounter them on the street or at like random stuff that I do, and I just try to give them worth in general. Just treat them as people. Like our first rule in Chicago was just be cool with folk. Like whatever that means. Like these are human beings, and they're human beings in a really rough situation. But they don't often get treated like human beings. They get treated like leeches or scum or any of these other things. And so just a little bit of relational capital goes a long, long way.
So the way that you were able to get out of this was a friend lent you their couch and then ended up just giving you the whole apartment.
Yeah, basically. The way that I got out of homelessness was because ultimately, like, you know, you're 17 and you don't do or know certain math equations. Like, for instance, I didn't have a credit score because I had literally, like, I didn't have bad credit. I had no credit, right? I was 17 years old. Additionally, I didn't know, like, I didn't know you needed to make, like, 3 times rent, right? Or have, like, a roommate or things like that. And, you know, my minimum wage job was not paying me enough to get a 3-bedroom or, like, a 1-bedroom apartment or a studio, like, with any kind of comfortability or in any way that like a landlord would be okay with it. And so it kind of got into this weird place where I had just turned 18 and I was looking for places and wasn't being accepted. And I finally, like, someone was dropping me off. My friend Justin was dropping me off one night and was driving me toward the park, and I was like navigating in my head like what story I was going to tell him about where he was leaving me, and then like let him move on and like drop. And I think for whatever, like I'd known him for 2.5 months or so, and he realized he had never seen where I lived. And so I was telling him to drop me at like an apartment complex nearby, and then he wasn't having it, and so he asked me for the gate code. I didn't know it. And so he was just kind of like, okay, dude, like, what's up? Like, where do you live? What's going on? And I had to come clean and explain, like, hey, I've been living on a park bench for a couple months now. And he was just kind of like, one, you're an idiot. You've known me long enough that you could have said something. And two, you're not going to do that anymore. And so he kind of brought me home, and I stayed on his couch for a while, and then he was wrapping school up, and so that became like a, hey, just pay me like $200 in rent, and then it was, hey, we'll just put you on the lease and like make it work, and then it was, and like his dad co-signed for me because I didn't make enough money, and then it was like, hey, I'm moving, like find a roommate, the apartment's yours, kind of thing. And so yeah, like that was what that transition kind of looked like for me.
Now, when you were on the streets, were you a Christian?
Yeah.
Okay.
At that time, yeah.
So did that play a part into keeping, like, going? I don't know how to word what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I don't know. It's hard. I almost feel disingenuous in some ways. Like I lived without a home, but in some ways it feels weird to consider myself homeless in the way that like a lot of people I work with day in and day out are homeless. My faith absolutely played into it, right? Like my faith played into it, my background played into it. For me, it was a matter of knowing like, so everyone struggles a little bit different. My particular struggle, like my daddy issue, if you will, was always feeling as though I had the need to prove myself.
Yeah.
And it still is, like I still have to handle that in a lot of ways. And so in that particular sense, it was like, it was kind of 3 months of God repeatedly like teaching me right out of the gate that like, no, you don't have to prove yourself, and no, you can't handle everything, and no, you're not this independent person who like doesn't need help and never needs to ask for anything and can just work harder and make stuff work out or like do whatever. Like you're a 17-year-old kid and this is too much for you and you did make a mistake. And so yeah, like it was, in some ways it was a good kind of brokenness. Because it was a good wound, or the revelation of a good wound, where I got to kind of very carefully and in a much more extreme way than I hope any of you ever have to deal with, like just deal with my own pride, arrogance, and independence, like as a whole.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I had something that I wanted to ask on top of that. So, would you say that the biggest reason you didn't want to tell anyone comes from like the way you were raised, like you were talking about your dad? Like, so if you had come to him telling him that basically in a sense you failed yourself, that wasn't going to be okay. Like that's just not something that you thought you could do.
Yeah. I mean, it was shame driven, okay. Right? It was this like cultural and familial and parental like echo of responsible people with jobs who know how to handle, please excuse me, know how to handle their shit and know how to like budget or do do whatever and who are willing to work hard, like those people don't get homeless and don't make this mistake.
Right.
And if that happens to you, it means that you've messed up at some level, right? Like you don't work hard enough, or you're irresponsible, or you're bad with money, or you don't have these things. And so with all of that kind of swirling around and echoing to me, it just felt too shameful or vulnerable to reveal that was the situation that I existed in.
Sure.
And when it came to, calling my dad or calling my mom, like it wasn't my dad and I we do now. We didn't at the time have the greatest relationship in the world.
Okay.
And so it was, that conversation could have gone two ways, at least in my head. I'm sure it wouldn't have gone that way, but in my head it was either "and I told you so," or it was a reversion from kind of a self-identified adulthood back into childhood that I wasn't willing to make, right? And so there were like components of my own pride in there, and then there was fear, and then there was shame. But ultimately, like that admission to other people would have been a tacit admission of my own inadequacy as a person.
Sure.
To me in those ways.
So then one last thing that I have. So, and I'm not meaning to overstep, but
No, you're
you're
good.
married, right?
Sorry, say what?
You're married.
Yes.
So I don't know if you have children or if you're trying to or anything. But
I do. I have
this...
a 5-year-old.
Okay. So is this
Yeah.
something that you have, told yourself, like, I am not gonna be this way. I'm gonna make sure that my child has an open relationship and isn't scared to come to me. Like, what difference has growing up with that experience changed you?
Yeah. In so many ways. It's hard to kind of limit it to just one, but I'm trying to think of like a particular story I can tell you. So in some ways, like so in little ways, like there's something that I kind of like. He's 5 now. Though I don't know how familiar you are with kids, but the Y phase starts at around 4, right? I get geared up for the Y phase. If you can't tell from this particular chat, or if Shane hasn't told you stories, I can be somewhat long-winded, and I read a lot and enjoy information as a whole,
Which is a good thing.
right? Yeah, and so, but like there are game plans for the Y phase for me, and so like my goal in any conversation with Jeremiah is to give him more information than he's ready for at any given point, so that he like goes to ask me another question and just kind of like stops, and it's like, I actually don't know that I'm ready to ask that. I'm gonna simmer on it for a little bit, see where that goes, and kind of my thinking behind that and the way that we've structured the house is he gets an answer to any question he wants, right? There isn't anything that I bar him from. There isn't anything that I like. In my mind, if you're asking the question, you are emotionally mature enough to handle the answer.
Wow.
Because that's like the fact that you're asking the question is a demonstration that your brain's already there, right? And so as a result of that, like we literally talk about anything, and he knows that and granted, he had to grow up really fast, right? Like his I don't know if Shane's told you about Michelle, but so my wife had a stroke on our wedding night. That was an interesting few months of marriage, and as a result of that, there are still like latent like medical and mental effects. And so like he had to grow up knowing like there is a medical thing wrong with my mom, and I have to kind of plan my life around that, right? Or like I have a pretty rough case of bipolar 2, and so like I'm medicated, but every now and then there are downswings, and like we have to have real open conversations about why daddy can't get out of bed right now, or stuff like that. And we also like we lived in Chicago and did like community development work, and he had to grow up around people who are maybe darker than the average sort, right? Like or not even darker, like just colorful in like many like we grew up, or he grew up the first few years of his life in a like 97.8% LGBT like neighborhood,
Wow.
where like his babysitter was a burlesque dancer on the weekends upstairs, and like our next door neighbors were a gay active like lifestyle BDSM couple, and so like there was no shortage of very real conversations this
Yeah.
morning
Really?
we had to have like really early on.
Wow.
And so I think like part of my experience in feeling that shame is like what I constantly reinforce to him, which is like messing up is necessary. The most important thing. Ooh, hold on a second. My screen just died on you. Like messing up is necessary. The most important thing, like skill that you can develop, is being able to admit that you don't know something, that you're wrong, that it's okay not to know something, and it's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay to stay there, and you have to do something with that. And so far, like he's 5, that's worked out really well. Ask me in 10 years, and we'll see how that went. But yeah, like it motivates every interaction I have with him, right? And he knows I was homeless, and he asks questions about it all the time.
Yeah. Well, gosh, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I don't
thank
know,
you.
Shane, if you have more. But that was so insightful, because I really had no idea of your background before.
Yeah.
I was just told, the basics.
Sorry.
So, like, I had no idea, like, where this was gonna go.
Yeah.
But I feel better for it. I'm really thankful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I like honestly didn't know how to respond when you hit me up on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, I was homeless.
Does this
Not
need
really
to
sure
happen?
what. Okay.
Do I really have to?
I
No,
mean,
thank you. I really
knew
appreciate
you
it.
knew, right? I don't hide it.
Yeah,
right?
no.
But like it was one of those things. I was like, just a weird question, and I'm not sure exactly
Yeah,
what's going on with
I know,
this.
she was like, okay, he said yes. And we're like, okay, great.
I'm sorry.
So are you guys studying like social services, or like what are you?
Yeah, we're actually in a social work concentration for our
Nice.
yeah.
We're going to change the world.
Yeah, just
You just wait.
War of inches. Okay, like
Absolutely.
as someone who's had 2 different nervous breakdowns. Okay, like please, for the love of God, pace yourself. Like we used to get people from Loyola and like DePaul in Chicago who'd come and do like a summer intensive with us in the neighborhood, and the one thing we used to tell them is like, any image you have in your head right now of like you go into a school to tutor English, and at the end of the year they're all caught up on English and there's like a banner and stuff, like that needs to go away. You're
That's
gonna
not
talk to
gonna
like a
happen.
4th grader who reads at a kindergarten level, and he might read at a 1st grade level when you're done, assuming he's not like still giving you shit after the 3 months are over. Like
Yeah.
True.
you need to just calm down.
Yeah, no, I know.
he said you're not gonna save the world.
I know. Whatever, one person at a time.
You aren't gonna save the world, but you're gonna be a part of this thing that happens, right?
That's
like
all I want.
the way I put it, and like it put, is like God doesn't need you, but He's inviting you to play. So like, let's go play. Like, let's go do that.
Let's go.
I'm down.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
No problem. Good to hear from you, Shane.
Yeah, good to hear from you too.
See you guys
Bye.
later.
Nice to meet you, Nick.